The big animals are the stars of Africa. They're exciting and sometimes savagely unpredictable. But alongside the big and the obvious is an overlooked world of smaller creatures. These are the true rulers of our planet, whose mysterious ways we cannot do without. Yet we hardly know them. And in our ignorance, we even fear them. Join us for a glimpse into this strange realm, the hidden world of Africa.
We are all captivated by the giants of the African plain. The great lions, tall giraffes, powerful rhinos, and thundering elephants. But did you know that when you look a little closer, there is also another Africa filled with giants? On this edition of Explore the Wildlife Kingdom, we're going to take a look at a world that usually goes unnoticed. A micro-world of tiny creatures who are the true rulers of Africa. Join us now for a close-up look at the hidden world of Africa.
Our guides to this hidden realm are wildlife filmmakers David and Carol Hughes, who have lived and filmed in Africa for more than 20 years. They've made their home in the wilds and are familiar with the animals that live here. Today, they're making their way to a hideout they've built beside a waterhole in the heart of South Africa's Kruger National Park. For David and Carol, this is where the day begins. It's from places like this that they watch and wait, to film the ever-changing scenes that unfold as animals gather here to drink. Kruger is one of the world's largest national parks and is famous for the rich variety of its animal life. For many years, David and Carol have filmed here, and in their search for images, have concentrated on these larger animals. They share the fascination that big animals hold for us. But they've also discovered that there's a lot more going on here than meets the eye. Side by side with the large animals exists a teeming world of smaller creatures. A dance of life, not always obvious to our eyes. Often, The small are shy and hard to see among the bustle of a busy waterhole. For every kind of mammal that comes here to drink, there are about 400 kinds of invertebrate living nearby. These small creatures are the heavyweights in the balance of nature. As this solitary bee rummages in a water lily, it performs an essential service for plants. While pushing and probing for food, these insects become vital links, carrying pollen from flower to flower. Some, like this spiny bug, seem to linger on one kind of flower, while others hurl themselves into a variety of blossoms along the way. For this African honeybee, the payoff is in the pollen, which will be carried back to the hive, neatly packaged on its rear legs. Each honeybee is just one of thousands that make up a hive. But others, like this carpenter bee, are solitary and nest in holes in branches. The leaf that suddenly snatches its prey is really a young praying mantis. But it's later, as an adult, in full leaf, that the beauty of her deception is revealed. Who can tell where mantis ends and leaf begins? Another kind of mantis has an unusual way of protecting her eggs. She encloses them at the center of a tough-skinned bubble. But no creature is entirely ahead in the game of survival, and the tough skin of the bubble can't prevent this parasitic wasp, barely the size of a pinhead, from drilling a hole into it and injecting some of her own eggs alongside those of the mantis. A few weeks later, a host of tiny mantis, perfect miniatures of the adult, hatch from their egg case. And it's clear that most have survived the parasites. Soon afterward, there are more signs of life inside the bubble. This time, it's the parasites. The parasitic wasps are so minute and so difficult to film that David and Carol have moved the egg case into their studio, where they will have more control.
How's it look?
Take a look. Take a look. It's great.
Got it. Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
Lovely.
So you see the little guys beginning to nibble already?
Oh, yeah.
Before the wasps can leave the nest, one of them must nibble a hole through the bubble. From this tiny hole, too small for a pin to pass through, all the wasps will squeeze their way to the outside world. Finding a mate in the great outdoors is not left to chance. Before they leave, the wasps mate in the case. It is mainly females, probably already mated, that now leave. Someday, they too will parasitize the eggs of another mantis. Back in the world of mighty mammals, buffalo come thundering down to drink. They've been grazing some distance from water and are thirsty. There are hundreds of buffalo in a herd like this, and in the whole of Kruger, there are as many as 25,000. The amount they graze is enormous, And this herd alone will produce nearly a ton of dung each day. Dung litters their path to the Waterhole, and it seems it wouldn't take long for the plains of Kruger to be smothered in the manure of its many herds. But a wonderful system of supply and demand works here. As fast as the dung is produced, dung beetles move in to claim their share. Without these little guys, dung could choke out the plants and limit the number of animals the land could support. Some, like this pair, shape the dung into a ball in which the female will lay eggs. Later, the ball will also provide food for their developing young. When they're satisfied with their work, the male beetle rolls the ball away while the female holds on tightly. They may travel 20 yards or more until they find the right place to bury it. On the way, he often stops to look around and set his direction. As more and more beetles home in on the dung, the competition becomes lively. Sometimes there are so many beetles that dung becomes scarce, and for latecomers, the best strategy is to rob another beetle. It may be less trouble to go off and make another ball. Finally, the beetles bury their dung. As the male digs from underneath, the ball slowly sinks out of sight. When it's about a foot below the surface, the beetles will mate and lay their eggs. As the day comes to a close, the Waterhole is once again visited by animals having a last drink before nightfall. Today, David and Carol are in search of one of the most important creatures on our planet. It lives underground, which is home to more animals than we might imagine. In some parts of Africa, the combined weight of creatures living in the earth is greater than those living above it. In a forest like this, it's termites living in the earth that perform the vital task of breaking down dead vegetation and returning its nutrients to the soil. Those same pests that destroy our homes prevent decaying vegetation from choking out the living. Though termites usually remain hidden, the homes of some are easy to see. These mounds house the oldest form of organized community on Earth. And this time, in a harmless reversal, people are invading a termite home.
Go in a little tighter. Go in tighter now.
David and Carol have carefully entered a mound to film the hidden workings of a colony.
Yeah, just a bit tighter. Just a little
This
bit.
mound may contain as many termites
Lovely.
as there are
Lovely.
people
That's great.
in a major city. They live here in a world of total darkness, where temperature and humidity are more finely controlled than in our most sophisticated buildings. These termites don't live on dead wood alone. To add to their diet, they cultivate special gardens of fungus, which they grow on sponge-like combs made from their own excretions. On some combs, the fungus is dotted about like miniature cotton. Pincer-jawed soldiers constantly patrol the mound, for deep within lies the queen's chamber. The queen is a pulsating egg factory, so obese she can barely move. She doesn't have to. The workers tend to her every need. They feed her with their own secretions and constantly groom her giant body. And as she lays her eggs, workers are always on hand to receive the 20 or 30,000 she may produce each day. The eggs are piled together in brood chambers within the combs of the fungal gardens. Here they are carefully tended until they hatch into little nymphs, which, depending on the needs of the colony, will become either workers or soldiers, or perhaps even future kings or queens. Also within the nest, and living on the bodies of the termites, are tiny mites, which seem to be easily tolerated by their hosts. But the real heart of the colony beats here in the Queen's chamber, where, for 10 years or more, she will continue to lay her eggs. A soaking rain drenches the plains and bush of the Kruger Park, but does little to dampen the spirits of these young male giraffe. This is just play. The real battles will come later when they compete for the attention of a female. Rain is welcomed as much by the small creatures as the big. And this scorpion performs its own remarkable rain dance as it exposes its mouth to catch the falling drops. Rain brings relief and renewal to everything. It sets in motion the slow, gentle courtship of slugs. And when heavy enough, triggers a brilliant emergence of velvet mites from the soil. They forage for a while on the damp ground before beginning a fumbling search for a mate. The strange ceremony of their courtship begins when the male solicits a female by touching her back. If she's interested, she follows the male as he turns in a circle while laying down a thread behind him. All along the thread, he has deposited little drops of sperm. As he guides her over the thread, the female takes up the sperm through a tiny opening under her body. After a few turns on the floor, the crimson courtship is over, and the couple go their separate ways. After good rains, winged termites may be released from their colonies. These are royalty, the kings and queens of future colonies. Soon they shed their wings, find mates, and together burrow into the soil. Termites are a rich and nutritious food, a gourmet snack for many animals. These eagles have gorged themselves and are losing interest. But a jackal can manage a lot of termites and shows no sign of slowing down. Like some old ritual before the hunt, this lion gently rubs his face in buffalo dung. Why he does it is a mystery. His pride have killed nearby, and he goes now to claim his share. The lions have brought down a buffalo. It's a kill big enough for the whole pride, but he doesn't think so. Scorpions are night hunters too. This kind hunt mostly from their burrows, waiting in ambush for their most common prey, the millipede. Nighttime in the bush is dangerous enough for big animals. But the small creatures, too, must run a gauntlet of fearsome predators. A sun spider devours a cricket, while the scorpion picks its way through the millipede. For the scorpion, a meal like this could mean survival for another 6 months. A tiger beetle has cut short the maiden flight of a winged termite. And elsewhere, a centipede feeds on a grasshopper. Though thousands of termites took wing this day, few will survive the night. David and Carol live in a nature reserve which borders the Kruger Park. Their house is on the edge of wild African bush, and some of their neighbors like to stop by for informal visits. Ostrich check out the Hughes kitchen from time to time for scraps and leftovers.
predators?
Monkeys, too, are frequent callers, always hoping to be invited to tea. But David and Carol draw the line at feeding these mischievous little guys.
Hello, my pretties. Here we are.
This large family of warthogs have better manners. They're old friends, and during a recent drought, were happy to get some help with their meager diet.
There. That's it.
The Hughes home is on the banks of a river which runs through Kruger. It's here that this old tusker spends much of his time. He's at a ripe old age, and his tusks are some of the biggest ever recorded in Kruger. They may even be the biggest tusks of any elephant in Africa. Every year, white storks make the long journey from Europe to Africa. Many of them find their way to the grasslands of Kruger, where there's always plenty of food. Grasshoppers are the main attraction here. And with more than 100 kinds in Kruger, there's a great selection to choose from. They're hardy feeders too, and in some areas, they put away more vegetation than all the big animals together. Their sheer numbers make them a major item on the menu of many predators, like this chameleon. One of the most numerous creatures of all are the ants. It has been calculated that the combined weight of ants is about equal to that of all the people on Earth. Ants are the most successful social insect, and they form some of the most intriguing relationships in the animal world. These befriend a totally unrelated species, a scale insect. The ants give the immature scale insect protection. In return, they receive, on tap, a supply of sweet honeydew, brought forth with a few caressing strokes of the ant's antennae. Some ants take more than they need for themselves and become a supply for others. But there comes a day when the honeydew dries up, the pupal case splits open, and the scale insect begins to emerge. For several weeks, the ants have given it total protection. Now it's reached a stage where it can make out on its own, and it leaves. Elephants tend to take over at waterholes, and they always get their way. They have a new arrival with them today, and they're more wary than usual. This baby is enjoying one of his first baths. And it looks like he has a lot to learn. He will need years of care and guidance from his mother and family. Sisters and aunts will all help with his upbringing, and the youngster will be totally dependent on them for years to come. The wasps that use this waterhole will make just as much effort to ensure the survival of their young. The same mud that the elephants cover themselves with as protection against biting pests is used also by some wasps to build their nests. This nest seems to defy gravity, and perhaps intruders too, with its fancy entrance tube. The wasp completes the whole structure in just a few hours. But there's a tiny fly that makes collecting mud a hazard. This fly has a vested interest in what the wasps are doing. A nest may take several days to complete, and there will be many trips back and forth to the waterhole. And every time a wasp returns, the chances are that the fly will be watching. The fly has read the signs well and follows the wasp back to her nest. She settles on the nest's entrance funnel to assess the situation. She needs to know whether the nest is ready to receive her own offspring. The fly is a parasite, and if conditions are right, she'll lay her own young in the wasp's nest. But somehow, the fly can tell that this nest is not ready, and she leaves. The wasp, unaware of her deadly visitor, returns to the waterhole for more mud. When she's finished building, she stocks her nest with live caterpillars that she has paralyzed with a sting. She has already crammed about 20 caterpillars into each of 5 cells in her nest, and in every single cell, she has laid a single egg, suspended from the roof by a fine thread. In one of these cells, a wasp larva is wriggling out of its egg case. Soon it will tumble into the stock of fresh food that its parent has provided. And when it does, it begins immediately to feed. In just a few days of relentless eating, it has devoured every caterpillar in the cell. Soon, it becomes a near replica of the adult wasp, needing only wings before it leaves. At the nest of another kind of wasp, the parasitic fly is in luck. She has judged this nest well and is ready to make her move. As soon as the wasp leaves for the waterhole, the fly darts in and quickly drops her larva on the wasp's doorstep. The larva instinctively moves towards the dark interior and soon disappears into the nest. When the wasp returns, she continues to build, unaware that she has been duped, that the fly's larva will devour her offspring, and that much of her work will now be in vain. Impala herds graze and browse on the dry vegetation, and waiting for them, in the tall grasses, are countless parasites. These are the kind of ticks that wait for animals to come to them. It's a long odds wait, and fewer than 1 in 1,000 of these ticks will ever find a host. As the impala move closer, the ticks become alert. They can detect body heat and the carbon dioxide exhaled by the animals, and they're ready now to seize their opportunity. But the impala are not without defenses. They groom each other with specially designed grooved teeth in their lower jaws. These can comb out even the pinhead-sized ticks that are now climbing aboard. By combing each other in places they can't reach themselves, the impala cut down the numbers of ticks they must carry. All the animals at this waterhole have their share of ticks. It's a normal burden for them. The small amount of blood that each tick drinks is not usually enough to harm an animal, and an impala may carry 7,000 or more. A giraffe can host a staggering 50,000. But the good news is, there's a bird that makes its living eating ticks. They're commonly known as oxpeckers, but they're happy to forage on wild animals too. On a good day, a hungry oxpecker can eat more than 7,000 larval ticks. For oxpeckers, the body of every animal is a hunting ground that they must get to know. Different areas call for different techniques. This scissoring action is the best way to comb tiny ticks from smooth coats, while a furry ear requires a few quick, lucky dips and perhaps a little more tact. On impala, the places worth looking into are the little black tufts on their rear legs. But sometimes the bird's enthusiasm can be hard to take, and this impala has had enough. Warthogs particularly enjoy mud. They use it as an abrasive to help them rub off their ticks and lice, and to scratch those hard-to-reach places. Not all animals stay healthy enough to withstand the load of ticks they carry. This sick young giraffe has so many that they've reduced his resistance even further. Here is the culprit. This tick doesn't wait around for a host, but actively hunts one down. Using its front legs like antennae, it can detect the breath of the sick giraffe. Delicate sensors on each tip give the tick the direction of its prey. When the tick has figured which way to go, it takes off with a surprising turn of speed. The giraffe spends more and more time resting on the ground and becomes an easy target for even more ticks. Once on his body, they release a chemical signal which attracts others to the site. Eventually, the giraffe dies, and within an hour, the first blowflies have arrived at the scene. Most ticks leave now, except for those whose mouth parts are too embedded in their host. These become the targets of ants. As more and more blowflies arrive to lay their eggs, they set the stage for one of the most remarkable phenomena in nature. In the 4 days since the blowflies laid their eggs, the giraffe has been transformed into a wriggling mass of larvae. Now the first wave to reach maturity is dropping onto the sand, ready to burrow and pupate. As hard as it is to watch, this is nature's way of cleaning up. In just 1 week, the giraffe has been reduced to dry skin and bones. And now a new generation of flies is ready to emerge from the ground. By rhythmically inflating a sac inside its head and swelling it to almost twice normal size, the fly is able to force its way through the sand. This one has dragged its pupal case up with it and takes a while to get rid of it. The fly's stubby wings soon begin to expand as blood and air are pumped into their fine veins. Within an hour, they're inflated to their full size. Soon, the fly will join the thousands of other flies that wait, while their wings harden, before setting out to join the cycle again. Some don't get very far. Many end up in the webs of the countless spiders of the African bush. This female has had her fill, so she ties this one up for later. In each wild acre of Kruger, there are hundreds of thousands of spiders, and it's estimated that the weight of prey they eat is more than that eaten by all the large predators put together. As darkness falls in the African bush, David and Carol set out in search of a new cast of characters, creatures who are active only after dark. Night creatures can be elusive, and the Hughes search is often fruitless. But for David and Carol, these forays into the African bush at night are exciting. They never know what they're going to find. This large caterpillar is having a final meal before spinning itself into a cocoon, where it will be transformed into a magnificent moon moth. It lays down a strong framework of silk thread to support and hold the cocoon onto the branch. Hundreds of yards of silk spill from a spinning organ just below its mouth as the caterpillar gradually encloses itself. After a few weeks, there are signs of life in the cocoon. The moth's feathery antennae appear first. These super sensors will tell the moth much about its world. But first, it must haul itself out of its confining cocoon. The crumpled wings will unfold slowly as the moth hangs motionless, waiting. It will be a good 2 hours before they reach their full splendor. The moon moth trembles as she produces each egg. She glues them in clusters on a tree whose leaves the young caterpillars will eat. Finally, a much-needed rest for David and Carol. Time to relive the special moments of the day, and when just to listen to the sounds of the night is to know how privileged they really are.
Hear that?
Yeah.
Yeah. It must be the Swerney pride. They're having a big night tonight.
Dawn breaks through the mists and unveils a new day in Kruger, revealing again a familiar world and the animals that enrich our experience of Africa. The lion in the grass will always stir our senses. But these big animals are only the visible part of a greater wildness and mystery that is shaped and maintained by the smaller creatures. Without the hidden world to support and balance nature's wise design, this great wilderness as we know it would not exist. These too are the bright and the beautiful, part of the hymn to all creation, all creatures, great and small.
The small creatures that are part of the African landscape are simply amazing, and each has an important purpose. So the next time you're out and about in nature, take a closer look at your own hidden world. Join us again for another edition of Explore the Wildlife Kingdom as we journey into the kingdom of creation, a place where nature tells its own story and reveals to us wildlife's incredible design.